On January 28, 2010, 27-year-old Jessica Lloyd vanished from her home in Bellevue, Ontario. She never showed up for work, and her boss called her mother. When the parents arrived to her home, her car was still in the driveway. They can see that her purse, ID, and phone were still inside. They called the police, and soon the search for Jessica was on. What they did not know is that this was the work of a sadistic freak. He started by breaking into women's homes, posing in their underwear, stealing some, and then he escalated to sexual assault, eventually murder. He hid under the authorities' noses due to his high security in the Canadian forces. He was a commander trusted by many, but behind this honorable facade was a darkness no one could have imagined if they tried. Hello, welcome back to my channel where I deep dive into true crime, paranormal phenomena, cults, and history. Without further ado, let's get into today's case. Today's case takes place in Ontario, Canada, mainly in the area of Tweed. Tweed is a village located in central eastern Ontario. Initially, it was named Hungerford Hills after the neighboring township of Hungerford, but it was later renamed Tweed after the Tweed River in Scotland. It has a small population of 1,541 people. It is a quiet and generally safe place, but safety was tested between 2007 and 2010. This is when Russell Williams committed crimes ranging from break-ins to sexual assaults and would escalate to the murder of 2 women. I am discussing the serial rapist and murderer named David Russell Williams, aka the Tweed Creeper or the Killer Colonel. He terrified women in Canada. This is their story. David Russell Williams, or Russell as he is known in this case, was a decorated and respected colonel in the Canadian military. He was born on March 7th, 1963 in Broomsgrove, Worcestershire, England. He was born to Cedric David and Christine Nani Williams. His father worked as a metallurgist, which is essentially a scientist who studies and develops metals. I could not find any information about Christine's occupation, but given it was the 1960s, I may assume she could have been a stay-at-home mom and wife. They had a younger son named Harvey. In 1968, the family relocated to Chalk River, Ontario, Canada, when Cedric secured a job with Chalk River Laboratories, a nuclear research laboratory. In Canada, they befriended another family named the Savgas. In 1971, when Russell was about 7 years old, his parents divorced. This was after he was caught having an affair with their friend, Marilyn Savga. Shortly after the divorce, Christine married Dr. Jerry Savga. Yes, she married one half of their married friends. Obviously, their marriage ended. The kids took Jerry's name, and he began going by the name of Russ Savga. They also moved to Scarborough, roughly 250 miles or 400 kilometers from Chalk River. Despite the divorce and quick remarriage, he seemed to have a stable and safe environment. He showed no signs of what he would go on to do. He got along with his stepdad despite the situation. In 1978, he began attending Birchmount Park Collegiate Institute, where he remained into the following year. This is similar to a high school. The family relocated again after Jerry was offered a job in South Korea to oversee a reactor project. Russell attended Upper Canada College, a boarding school, for his last 2 years of high school. In his final year, he was appointed to a prefect, essentially serving as a mentor to the lower classes. I did find out that this housemaster was sexually assaulting boys between 1975 and 1980. He was arrested in 2004. I found nothing to confirm whether Russell was a victim or not, but it is a strange coincidence. After high school, he attended the University of Toronto, Scarborough, where he studied politics and economics. Paul Bernardo attended the same college 2 years ahead of him. He was a serial killer who sexually assaulted and murdered several women. He was known as the Scarborough Rapist. He also killed several women with his girlfriend, Karla Homolka. You might know them as the Ken and Barbie killers. That is a case I want to cover, so let me know if you'd be interested in that. There was one witness that said that they partied together, but it was only one person. It's unconfirmed if they actually crossed paths, but just a weird tidbit. Anyways, during his time at college, he was described as polite but a little awkward and shy with no red flags. He was hardworking and played the trumpet. Apparently, he was pretty good. Friends said he had OCD, but nothing that would indicate his future crimes. He would just make cleaning schedules for roommates to clean the living areas. Russell played pranks on his roommates. He would pick their locks and hide in their room, which is similar to crimes he would later commit. He graduated with his Bachelor of Arts in 1986. Around this time, he returned to using the last name Williams. He had a college girlfriend who was head over heels in love with him. She ended up breaking up with him. He was devastated and caught off guard as he thought it was going really well. He became obsessed with Top Gun and could recite all the lines. He was fixated on joining the Air Force to win back his ex-girlfriend. In 1987, he began flying at the Buttonville Airport in Toronto. This is when he joined the Canadian Forces. He received his flying wings in 1990. He was assigned to the 3 Canadian Forces Flying Training School at the Canadian Forces Base, Portage-la-Prairie, Manitoba. He served 2 years there as an instructor. On January 1st, 1991, it was a great year for Russell, both professionally and personally. He was promoted to captain. He was working his way up the ladder fast. He also met and married his girlfriend, Mary Elizabeth Harriman. They were said to have had a very stable, happy marriage. They had no children, but had a cat named Curio. They were said to have had a parent-child sort of love for their cat, which if you're a pet parent, I'm sure you can understand. Russell was stationed in Nova Scotia in 1992 at the Canadian Forces Base in Shearwater. He specifically flew the CC-144 Challenger for electronic warfare and coastal patrol. He was reassigned to Ottawa in 1994 to the 412 Transport Squadron. He would transport high-ranking politicians and even the freaking Queen Elizabeth. Soon, he was promoted to major and stationed in Ottawa. He attended the Royal Military College of Canada, where he earned his Master of Defense Studies after writing a thesis on preemptive war in Iraq. He was promoted to lieutenant colonel and assigned to the Trenton base in Ontario and stayed there for 2 years. At the time, the couple lived in Ottawa, but they purchased a cottage in Tweed where he would live during the weekdays and drive the 2.5 hours on weekends to live with Mary. Sometimes she would go to Tweed and visit her husband. Tweed is just north of Bellevue. He would go back and forth for the next 16 months. In 2001, his father and stepmother divorced. There was some family drama, and he stopped talking to his brother and sister. Despite the drama, his professional accolades continued to grow. From December 2005 to May 2006, he served as commanding officer of Camp Mirage. This is a secret logistics facility. It is top secret and not really known where it's located, but most likely at El Minhad Air Base in Dubai, Saudi Arabia. This is to provide support for the Canadian forces in Afghanistan. In 2009, he spent 6 weeks in Quebec learning French at the Canadian Forces Language School. During his training, he was promoted to colonel. He was highly respected, but things were soon about to change. On September 8th, 2007, Russell broke into his neighbor's cottage when they were away. He took pictures of himself in a young girl's underwear, posing in a pornographic manner. He then stole some of the underwear and took it back to his cottage. In the following months, he continued this pattern of breaking into residences in the Tweed area of his secondary residence and his main property in Ottawa. He targeted families who were away at night. This included young women and girls. He obtained access to the homes by unlocking doors, cutting screens, or picking locks. Again, he took pictures of himself in bras and panties, spread out on a bed, stealing the garments as trophies. The break-ins started in Tweed and were so minor that they went unnoticed. It would not be long before his crimes would escalate. One break-in, he left out a photo he clearly pleasured himself on. Another time, he wrote a taunted message on the computer in one of the residences he broke into. Break-ins in the Ottawa area were reported, and undercover officers were set to stake out the area, but they made no suspicious sightings. Profiler Jim Van Allen deduced that the intruder was becoming more aggressive. He was concerned that he posed a danger of sexual assault. Unfortunately, this came to fruition in September 2009. On the 17th, a woman who is simply known as Jane Doe was attacked by Russell. She was sleeping. She was alone, and as her husband was out of town because he was a truck driver. He broke in, woke her up, hit her on the side of the head, and then tied her to a chair. He bound and blindfolded her using pillowcases. She endured him sexually assaulting her for 2 hours. She begged him not to hurt her or her baby. I forgot to mention she had a baby that was sleeping in the room with her. Still, he forced her to pose in nude photographs, then told her to count to 300 while he left the home. She ended up calling the police, but they were very dismissive of this because to them it sounded very far-fetched and she was acting erratically, whatever that means. Of course, she was distraught. She was tied up and assaulted. I do not know how anyone could be calm, especially with her baby present. 2 weeks after his first assault, Lori Massicott was attacked in the same manner on the 30th. She was a 46-year-old woman who lived alone and her home was 3 doors down from Russell. She fell asleep on her couch while watching TV. She woke up to a blanket over her head and felt someone punching her repeatedly in the head. He reached under the blanket and put his hands around her throat. He told her not to resist and that this was a home invasion and it was his job to subdue her. Obviously, this was all a lie. He blindfolded her and tied her up, then used a knife to cut her clothing off. She heard a camera click as he directed her how to pose. She was terrified, so she did everything he asked. Her head was hurting badly after the attack, so he allowed her to get aspirin, but he escorted her to the bathroom. On the way out, he rubbed her temples and apologized. However, he kept taking pictures of her and made her pose in a harness he made. He finally left at 4:30 a.m. After Lori's attack, the police finally made a statement to the public about the intruder. Constables went door to door in hopes of receiving leads. At this point, he was named the Tweed Creeper. There was no DNA left, no leads, and no one recognized him, even though he was a neighbor. On October 29th, a neighbor of Russell, Larry Jones, pulled into Russell's driveway to find 20 police officers surrounding his home. They were convinced he was the creeper. He did not have the best reputation with his neighbors, as he would often argue with them. One neighbor shot him in the hand. Lori said that she recognized the attacker's voice. Lori just did work in her home, so she thought maybe it could be him. It was possible she recognized Russell's voice, but since she just saw Larry, she connected the voice to him. They get a search warrant and take his computer to search. They saw no women's underwear. They do take his boots and knives, and when they questioned him, they asked if he was abused as a child and why he was obsessed with women's undergarments. He adamantly denied that he was involved and agreed to a polygraph, and his DNA was tested. They let him go home while they waited for the results because he was so cooperative. In November, a woman came home to find her underwear and drawers slightly pulled out and missing panties, but she thinks she may have left them like that. This was until she checked her nightstand and found an adult toy missing. She was embarrassed and did not call the police, but she called a friend to help find these items. But what she finds is a message on her computer that says, quote, "I dare you to call the police. I would love to tell them about your huge dildo," unquote. She thought that he either hid in the linen closet when she initially came home or came back because the notes were not there when she first got home. She ended up calling the police anyway. Unfortunately, these horrific acts would only be the beginning. Soon his reign of terror would escalate into murder. Marie-France Comeau was a Canadian Forces corporal under Russ's command in Trenton. She was born in Quebec City, but grew up in multiple cities, including New Brunswick, Quebec, and even Germany. She came from a military family, including her grandfather. She continued this family tradition by joining the reserves in 1995. In the early 2000s, she became of the Operation Apollo, the Canadian Forces' involvement in the conflict in Afghanistan at the time. In 2008, she became a flight attendant at the Trenton base. She was described as a friendly, positive person who was always smiling. In November 2009, she went on to her last mission where she flew to Japan, Singapore, and India to accompany the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper. She lived in the town of Brighton, which is just west of Trenton. When she returned home from the trip, she realized someone had gone through her underwear drawer. She assumed it was her boyfriend Paul, but he strongly denied her accusations. On November 23rd, 2009, Marie was at home getting ready for bed. She spoke with Paul and made dinner plans for the next night. Russell broke into her home through an open window and hid in the basement. Her cat went downstairs and was fixated on the basement. She ended her phone call and was finishing getting ready for bed. She went to look for her cat and went downstairs to the basement. She saw he was fixated on a specific corner, and she saw a man, but his face was covered. She put up a fight, but he hit her in the head several times with a flashlight. He tied her to a pillar in the basement, taped her mouth shut, and took photos. He went upstairs doors to make sure the home was locked. He returns, unties her. She fights back and tries to run away, but he catches her. In the bedroom, in the span of 2 hours, he sexually assaults Marie and took more pictures. He left to check the locks again. She threw herself off the bed trying to escape, but knocked into a wall and broke a picture off the wall. He took control again and forced her to take pictures in lingerie. He took photographs and videos of the whole horrible ordeal. He tried to suffocate her with a pillow, but she fought back. He told her that if she cooperated, he would let her go. She calmed down and he put tape over her nose. He continued to record her until she suffocated to death. He then wrapped her body in her duvet cover and left her in the bedroom. He went to work in a matter of hours after murdering Marie, and his demeanor never seemed off or slightly different to anyone. She missed her dinner with Paul, which was unusual for someone in the military, as they are very dependable and very on time. On November 23rd, Paul grew concerned for Marie as he went to her residence to check on her, and her car was in the driveway, but she did not answer when he knocked. He went to the back of her house and saw that the patio door was unlocked. So he entered her home. He reached her bedroom and found her deceased body wrapped in the duvet cover. She lay there for 30 minutes before she was discovered. The police searched her home for clues, but first they thought she ended her own life, but the blows to her head refuted the theory. There was also blood drops, hair drenched in blood, and footprints on the basement floor, which were consistent with the struggle. She also had remnants of tape on her mouth and ligatures on her wrists, proving her mouth and nose were covered, most likely suffocating her. They concluded her wrists were bound using a restraint measuring a ½ inch. The police told the public that she was murdered, but there is no cause for safety. They assumed Paul killed her in a domestic dispute. However, Paul had a strong alibi and passed a polygraph. I know polygraphs are unreliable, so luckily he passed. Her ex, Al, was also investigated but ruled out. The police kept pretty quiet, which did not ease Brighton's community affairs. They kept her cause of death, the fact that the killer's footwear impressions and that the DNA was left on her sink in hopes that this would help catch him. Russell does what law killers do and inserts himself into the investigation. He contacted her father and gave him his condolences. The next day, he took part in a charity event called Jail and Bell, where he posed in a haunted picture of himself being mock arrested for being too young to be a wing commander. Her funeral was on December 4th, attended by hundreds of friends and families, but despite reaching out to her father, Russell opted not to attend. She was buried in the National Military Cemetery in Ottawa. In December, Russell and Mary moved from their main home to a new one in Westboro. Mary continued to reside in their primary residence during the week, and Russell stayed at the cottage, but soon the disappearance of a young woman would put end to his terrible reign. Jessica Lloyd was a 27-year-old woman who lived on Highway 37 near Bellevue. She was born in Ottawa. Her father was in the Canadian Navy. When her dad retired, the family moved to Bellevue. They built the dream family home, which Jessica inherited when he passed away from cancer when she was 14. She worked at the Student Transportation Services as a transit planner and was loved by everyone. She was a bubbly, happy young lady. She had an older brother who was described her as witty and said that she had a unique sense of humor. On January 28, 2010, Jessica spent a few hours at a friend's home. They watched a movie and then she headed home. She texted her at 10:36 p.m. to let her know that she made it home safely. This was the last time anyone heard from Jessica. The next day, she did not show up for work. This was out of character, as she had worked for the same company for 2 years and had never been late. She was responsible and would not do that. They called her mom Roxanne because she used to work at the same company. Both Roxanne and Andy went to Jessica's home. They saw that her car was in the driveway. Andy saw tire tracks and footprints in the snow that led to her door. Her doors were locked and with a sign of a break-in. Nothing was taken. Her cell phone, purse, wallet, eyeglasses, and ID were all still there. She lived alone, so she would have not left her without her vehicle. Police responded quickly and strongly suspected the creeper. Marie's murderer and Jessica's disappearance were related. They warned the public to secure their homes and to change their routines. A search was conducted, including a search and rescue aircraft from the Trenton base, authorized by Russell. No trace of Jessica was found, but witnesses saw a silver SUV. Notably, a police officer saw a SUV outside Jessica's home near a field around 9:30 p.m. on January 28th. She was suspicious of the vehicle and attempted to knock on the door, but no one answered. She took note of this and left. Investigators found tire tracks that were found 330 feet north of her home. They narrowed it down to possible vehicles, including the Nissan Pathfinder. On February 4th, they stopped similar vehicles and saw a 2001 Nissan Pathfinder whose tire treads matched those left in the snow. They set up a roadblock to find similar vehicle and stopped 2001 Nissan Pathfinder. This vehicle was driven by Russell Williams. Initially, they let him go because he said that he had to get home to his sick child despite not having kids. On February 7th, Russell was at his primary residence in Ottawa. Police surveyed him as they saw Russell take his car to a car wash and have it vacuumed. When he drove away, they took the truck into custody. Ottawa police called him in for questioning. He left a note for his wife saying he would be back later, but he would never return home. At 3:30 p.m. that day, Russell arrived at police headquarters. He was interrogated by Detective James Smythe. Russell made it known that he was a high-ranking officer in the military. Detective Smythe knew that he needed to be neutral in this interview, so he did not come off as mean or as his buddy. So he just commented a short response. He offered him coffee and basically explained that he treats everyone he speaks to with respect. He read him his rights, which in Canada differ from America's Miranda rights, in that you do not have the right to refuse questioning without a lawyer, but you can consult a lawyer. He explained that the charges they were looking at, and he asked whether he needed to call a lawyer, but Russell said he did not. He asked Russell if there was any connection between him and the attacks. Russell said geographically speaking there is a connection and that he would drive past the locations. Smythe went through Russell's whereabouts for the night of Jessica's disappearance. Russell's alibi was very shaky, as he was alone at home and could only verified the time he was at the base. Then Smythe switches the topic to Marie. Russell said that he found out about her murder from an email. He also said that he only met her once. This was him downplaying their familiarity, as when she was found, he corrected it. He also told a friend she was teaching him French, but they only met once. Okay. Russell agrees to give them fingerprints, blood samples, and footwear impressions. This is important because he hid his photos, but forgot to change his shoes. The same shoes he wore when committing his crime. They asked if there was any reason he would ever been in any of the women's homes, and he said no. So he insinuated that if they found any, they would have a problem. This is the point where Russell became defensive. His body language shifted to crossed arms. Smythe told him that his tires matched the tracks outside Jessica's home and that witness saw a SUV they have reason to believe is his car. Russell remains adamant that he was not on that road on that night. Smythe just laid out the evidence and said that as time goes by, he looks more and more guilty. He felt close to a confession, so he did this technique where he stopped asking questions and let the silence get the best of Russell. He let Russell stew for a bit and told him they were searching his home and that his wife knew what was going on. This is what got to Russell. He told Smythe he wanted to lessen the impact on his wife, Mary. He confessed to the murders of Marie and Jessica and showed the police on a map where to find Jessica's body. He asked for a map to show where Jessica was. He told them that they could find the evidence inside the home in Ottawa. They located two 500 gigabyte hard drives that he had hidden in the ceiling of his basement after he got off the phone with Detective Smythe. There were 3,000 pictures and videos of his crimes, including the murder of Marie and Jessica. This included photos of the victims and him in their undergarments and many, many pairs of panties. Russell said that he saw Jessica in her home running on her treadmill one day. As he drove by, he continued to watch her like a freak. At 1 a.m. in the early mornings of her disappearance and murder, he snuck into her home as she slept. She woke up to Russell standing over her. He ordered her to roll over on her stomach. She thought that if she complied, he might allow her to live. He tied her hands behind her back and blindfolded her. He then dressed Jessica and forced her into his SUV and took her to his cottage in Tweed. He made her take a shower. She told him that she felt a seizure coming on, then had what appeared to be a seizure. Her family later said that she was not prone to seizures, so it was believed that she faked one in order to get sympathy and hopefully be returned home. He coached her through the seizure, but never took her to get help. She then said, "If I'm gonna die, please tell my mom that I love her." He let her get dressed and led her to the door. Poor Jessica thought he was taking her back home, but as they were leaving, he hit her on the back of the head with a flashlight. She immediately went unconscious, and he strangled her with a rope. On February 8th, the police went out and finally located Jessica. Russell was charged with the 2 murders, breaking and entering, forcible confinement, and 2 sexual assaults. He was taken into custody, relieved of all military duties, and promptly replaced. On Easter of that year, he was at the Quiet Detention Center. Around 5 a.m., he wrote a note on his cell wall in mustard saying that his affairs are in order and that he cannot live with his feelings. He jammed the door with cardboard and foil to prevent the staff from entering his cell. He then attempted to end his life by jamming a stuffed cardboard toilet paper roll down his throat. Staff were able to enter the cell and save him. He was evaluated and placed on suicide watch, where he would be watched 24/7. Then he began only giving authorities his name, rank, and serial number. He went on a hunger strike, but made no demands and soon abandoned it. In May, Jane Doe filed a lawsuit against Russell and his wife for $2 million due to depression and addiction from his assault against her. The claim against Mary was that she had signed his property over to Mary, but she said the transfer of ownership was legal and that her husband's charges were devastated and she just wanted to protect her assets. They ended up settling out of court. On October 18th, Russell pleaded guilty to 88 charges against him: 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of sexual assault, 2 counts of forcible confinement, and 82 counts of breaking and entering. He was sentenced to 2 life terms for the murders of Marie-France Comeau and Jessica Lloyd on October 21st. In Canada, a life sentence is not really life, as you're eligible for parole after 25 years, but it's very doubtful someone as violent as Russell would be released. His commission was revoked by the military and he was officially discharged from the Canadian Forces. In December, Mary filed for divorce from Russell. She requested that medical and financial information be sealed. The divorce was finalized in 2014 and her request to seal the information was denied. In 2011, Lori sued Russell, Mary, and the Ottawa police. She asked for $7 million, citing pain, suffering mental distress, and economic loss. She stated that the police not only failed to warn the public about a dangerous predator, but also accused her of lying. She said the police left her half naked and bound on the couch for hours. She overheard the police call her crazy on the police radio. Russell fought this, saying not only were they not entitled to compensation, but they should pay his legal fees. The audacity. Larry Jones also sued the police, and get this, Lori, the victim. He wanted $1.7 million. The police, I totally get, but suing the victim is ridiculous. Jessica's family also sued the couple. Russell settled with the first victim, Jane Doe, and the family of Jessica. The police settled with Lori as well. However, no statement or apology was ever made publicly. As of 2025, Russell has 10 years before he can apply for parole, at which time he'll be 72 years old. Russell had no warning signs, no horrible childhood, as any event could have caused this break in him. There was not much. He dealt with rejection over the college girlfriend, his death of his cat, and slight arthritis pain. His cat died after he broke into homes, and the other stuff is not enough to go from being not violent to committing crimes as awful and torturous as he would end up committing. I like to take a lesson away in these cases. Home is where you're supposed to feel safe. Russell observed his victims' habits. He knew that the homes that he broke into, there was no men present or they were away. He looked at how they locked up their house or didn't lock up their house. But in some cases, he just, broke the window or, cut the screen. So, it's just, kind of being aware of your surroundings. Don't do the same routine. A good safety tip is lock your doors. It's not to blame the victims. It's all Russell's fault. But we live in a world where there's with good and evil people. So, anything we could do to stay safe is best. Do you think his wife had any idea what was happening? I want to know your opinion, but please be respectful. If you are a judgmental dick, you'll be removed and blocked. Comment, subscribe, and like. If you have any future cases you'd like me to cover, please request one using the form in the description. Join me next time when I discuss an Austrian case for Missing Monday. Until then, stay curious, cautious, and safe. And don't be a creep lurking in women's homes and stealing their panties and sexually assaulting them. Okay, bye.